My name is Charlie Robinson. I'm the author of the book, The Octopus of Global Control, and this is about NASA. Never a straight answer. That's one of the acronyms we've heard. In the 60s, President Kennedy, in his funny Boston accent, talked about going to the moon by the end of the decade. And it was a really big deal. I mean, it was a big deal for national pride for the United States. It was a big deal for scientific purposes. People were excited about it. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that the brain power behind NASA, a lot of them were Germans. They were Nazis. They were brought over under Operation Paperclip. They were given immunity from war crimes prosecution and given American citizenship, basically given a life in exchange for working on our rocket program. Werner von Braun was the man behind all of that. He had worked on the V1. He was perfecting the V2, which was a rocket that had a better guidance system. And so NASA was quite literally started by Nazis. So one of the things that the Nazis brought over is obviously some secrecy and some shadiness too. So the moon landing is probably the ultimate conspiracy theory. Everybody's got an opinion on it. And we won't get into whether or not it's true what they did, but I think in order to have a more informed opinion about that, you really have to know a little bit more about NASA itself. Well, in 2006, NASA announced that they could not locate the copies of the moon landing from July 20th, 1969. It was part of 200,000 tapes that were magnetically erased and reused to save money, according to Dick Nafzger, an engineer at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. He said, "I don't think anyone in NASA organization did anything wrong. It slipped through the cracks and nobody's happy about it." You don't think they did anything wrong? They recorded over the moon landings. What are you talking about? I mean, this is... NASA is announcing to the world that they tape recorded over the most important moment in the history of mankind because it was taking up too much space in their archive room, and they wanted to record over it to save a little bit of money. Stan Lebar, he was one of the designers of the lunar video camera used by Neil Armstrong, says, "So I don't believe the tapes exist today at all. It was a hard thing to accept, but there was just an overwhelming amount of evidence that led us to believe that they just don't exist anymore. And you have to accept reality." Actually, you know what? No, you don't. That's bullshit. That is grade A bullshit. The original tapes, the most important achievement in the history of mankind, have been recorded over to save money by an organization that has siphoned literally trillions and trillions of dollars out of the U.S. economy, is now all of a sudden budget conscious. They're shopping at Marshall's and recording over their moon landing. I mean, this is such an insulting lie that it makes you want to question everything else about them. So, did the tapes get lost? Did they record over them? It's kind of hard to get a straight answer here, but there's one thing that a lot of people don't know about the actual moon landing. What you saw on television, if you were live in 1969 and were watching that, you saw a recording of a recording. They had a 16 millimeter camera in the Johnson Space Center that was set up at a television screen. What the viewing public saw was a recording from that 16 millimeter camera of a television screen at Johnson Space Center. Why they would do this, I have no idea. It sounds like an extra layer of to complicate things, and I'm not really even sure why they did that. But NASA explaining away the fact that they've recorded all over this stuff kind of reminds me of like a nervous husband being brought down to the station to be questioned about his wife's disappearance and the $5 trillion life insurance policy that he had just taken out in her name. So there's an interview of Michael Collins several years after, I think it was like 20 years after the landing on the moon, by the unlikable Bryant Gumbel. Bryant Gumbel says, Mike Collins, but for a day, how often are you reminded of your achievement? Well, if I go out back and look up at the sky and see the moon, either I can remember where I was 20 years ago or I can pretend I've never been there. It works for me either way. Huh? What kind of weird answer is that? Sounds like something Rumsfeld would say. Look, there's a video of the post-flight when Michael Collins, Neil Armstrong, and Buzz Aldrin are sitting at a table. They're addressing the media. This is after they've come back. The greatest achievement in human history. They look like hostages. I mean, those guys had clenched jaws, fists. Neil Armstrong honestly looked like he was going to throw up at any moment. That is not, it doesn't prove anything. But it's just a very weird and unnatural reaction to achieving an event like that. I'd encourage you to go back and watch it. I mean, it is stunning to see that. But, you know, all you really need to know about NASA can be found in the story in 2009. A Dutch museum had been given a moon rock after the historic landing on the moon by the United States. And I don't know why they did it, but they decided to test the moon rock, and it came back as actually being a piece of petrified wood. So the spokesman who oversaw the investigation that proved that the piece was a fake said that the museum would keep it anyway as a curiosity. Quote, "It's a good story with some questions that are still unanswered. We can laugh about it." NASA was handing out fake moon rocks. How fitting.